Well, good afternoon. It sounds like you have some thoughtful time ahead of you, but before you go, I would like to share with you just a reminder. The art of oral stories predates almost every other art form. It predates printed language, written language, and some believe even spoken language. And when you gather in your breakout sessions and you begin to talk, listen for the stories that you will hear emerging as people talk about opportunities and challenges and ideas and inspirations. Because everything that comes in the container of a story has greater impact. I would like to share with you just a brief story. It's based on a Pacific Northwest American Indian legend, and it is also based on a story by Christina Rodanis, who is a children's book writer. The name of this story is The Eagle's Song. The people lived on the edge of the sea. It was a magnificent land with great wooded forests, and it was filled with light and darkness and heat and cold. And yet they lived apart. Their homes were all separated, small gray huts dotted around the forest. They never gathered. They never shared with one another. And like a dense fog that hides the sun, their lives were full of loneliness and hearts were cold. In this village there lived 3 brothers. The 2 older brothers were fine hunters, and when they went out to hunt, they came back often with more than they needed. And they had plenty of meat and plenty of pelts to be able to keep themselves warm in the winter, but because the people did not know each other, no one ever thought to share. The youngest son, a boy who was named Ermin, never hunted, and when his brothers were gone, he kept himself there in his small hut, building boxes and bowls to hold all of the bounty that his brothers would bring back, and then he would paint them with pictures of the birds and the animals that were all around him. When his brothers saw what he had done, they teased him. They did not understand that the act of creating these wonderful pictures filled his heart and took away some of the loneliness. One day, his brothers set out to go to the far regions to hunt mountain goat, and they said, "We will return," but they did not. Day by day, the days faded into weeks, the weeks melted into months, and they did not return. And at last, the boy decided he had to go and find them. And although it was winter, he wrapped himself in furs and above and stepped on the ice while the wind howled above his head in the treetops and set off deep into the forest. The further he went, he began to hear a deep, rhythmic, throbbing sound. It was so compelling, it was so powerful for him that he abandoned his search and began to follow the beat that he heard. He stepped into a clearing, and above, a shadow flew above his head. And when he looked up, there was an immense eagle. It spiraled down and rested very near him, but the moment his feet touched the ground, the beat stopped. And he became, suddenly, an eagle man, a tall, handsome young man, wearing a great coat of feathers. And as he approached the boy, he said, "Have you come looking for your brothers? They are not here. They found me and they tried to harm me. They wanted my feathers for their own use. You won't find them here. Have you come to harm me? Do you want my feathers to decorate your weapons?" And the boy said, "No, I come only to find my brothers." He said, "You will not find them. When they tried to harm me, they were turned into 2 rivers as icy as their hearts. I cannot release them. But your spirit is different from theirs. And if you are willing to come with me and listen and learn from someone who is much wiser than I. Perhaps you can find a key to bring them back." And he transformed himself again into an eagle, and the boy climbed upon his back, and they took off high into the air above the icy mountains until they came to a place, a long hall much larger than anything the boy had ever seen. And in one far corner, wrapped in a great cloak of feathers, sat a very old woman, keeping warm by the fire. As he approached her, she held out a bowl filled with food. He accepted, and as he began to eat, she said, "Why is it that this simple act that you do here is unknown to your brothers? It is unknown to your people. Why do you not celebrate all that nature has given you? Why do you live in painful silence? You live as if you were in a cave of ice, away from the sunlight, away from the sound of the wind. But how can we break the silence?" And she looked at him with her ancient eyes, and he began to realize that she too had a heartbeat, although much slower and fainter than her son. And she said, "You rejoice and celebrate the way the animals do, the way the birds and the animals do, with movement and sound, and honor that all that the earth has given us. You share what you have. You share and rejoice in all that surrounds us. Now, if you can convince your people to do this, to honor all that is around them, to embrace, perhaps we might find a way to release your brothers." And with that, she reached under her cloak and she took out a small hollow log with caribou hide stretched tight across each end. And with a short stick, she began to bang on the drum, and a deep, resonant sound began to rise. And she threw back her head and she began to sing of why the sea lions swam in the surf, of why the eagles flew, of why the otters slid down the waterfall. And the boy felt himself lifted up with a sense of lightness he had never known. And as he listened to her sing, he began to flap his arms like raven, and he began to paw on the ground like deer do in the winter on the frozen and snowy ground. And then for the first time ever, he closed his eyes and he tipped back his head and he sang. And his heart was filled with a great longing to share. And when it was done, Eagle Mother said, "It's time for you to go. But if you can teach your people to share, to rejoice, to reach out to one another, to embrace all that is around you, perhaps your brother will come back." And the eagle put the boy on his back, and they lifted up again and brought him back to the place where they had met. He gave the boy a small handful of feathers and said, "Go." And when he returned to the village, the boy went into his house and he found a small log when he stretched the caribou tight across each end, and he took a short cedar stick and he added the feathers on the end for decoration, and taking bowls and boxes of food, he went outside his hut and he sat down and he began to beat on the drum. And the deep, resonating, throbbing rhythm began to rise up into the air. The children were the first to hear, aren't they always? And they crept forward, entranced by the sound. And then, little by little, as they listened to the music, they began to shuffle their feet. They began to turn and sing and laugh. And the food was there, and they began to celebrate until at last the sun began to go down, and their anxious parents went searching for them, following that odd sound they had never heard before, and were astounded when their children, smiling, laughing, ran to them, with food and said, "Come and hear." And they came, and warmed by the food and the sound of the drum, they began to sing, they began to dance, and all through the night they did, unaware that at the edge of the shore and deep in the woods the caribou danced with the bear, the eagle, the hawk, the raven rose and cried out into the night sky. And when the sun rose, other people came through the forest, carrying boxes of food, carrying pelts to share, and the festivities went on with renewed energy the entire day, when suddenly there was a sound much louder than anything that they had ever heard, and emerging from the forest came the brothers, returned and released. And from that time forward, the people built their houses side by side by side. They built a great hall where they could celebrate on a regular basis whenever they wanted to. And with Ermin's help, they painted great, wonderful images of birds and animals. And they gathered, and they shared, and they sang, and they banished the loneliness from their lives. And one day, Ermin went back into the forest to find the eagle man, who was, again, at that clearing. He bent down, and the boy climbed on his back, and they rose up into the air, and as they did, they were joined by another beautiful eagle with her shining feathers, and as she swept close, and he looked into her familiar and wise eyes, and heard her strong heartbeat, he knew that eagle mother had received her gift. She had been made young once again. Go into your breakout sessions. Remember, you carry with you, each and every one of you, a long lineage of arts and music and dancing and stories. Thank you.